Today, antennas and everything you need to know. One of the biggest selling points of having antenna is you don't have to pay for the TV. Xfinity and DirecTV and Dish Network, all of them like to hike up your prices, and they do offer more channels, but you can receive the local networks like KSL, KUTV, ABC, CBS, and a handful of others just right from your house with a few pieces of equipment, which is really cool. When you get to talking about how this is broadcast, it is over frequency waves. In years past, and I'm sure a lot of people remember the big change about analog to digital TV and whether your TVs would still be capable to handle receiving this over-the-air broadcast. The government was actually giving out free tuner boxes like this, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later, because it was a big deal. And that's because the analog was only broadcast using VHF signals or very high frequency signals. Now that we have moved to HD TV broadcasts and we have a digital broadcast, which means you can get 1080 and you can get even Dolby Digital surround sound from your antenna, we've moved to UHF, ultra high frequency. And to help drive that point in, we have good old Willie Nelson, who was very high frequently, and Snoop Dogg, who is ultra high frequently. Kind of a fun little joke. Anyways, one of the other differences between VHF and UHF is VHF was less susceptible to interference. Some people may remember the rabbit ear antennas, and you could throw little balls of aluminum foil on top of those to help your reception. You cannot do that anymore with digital channels. It's not going to help anything. With the UHF, everything you see is going to affect your signal. So you're going to get bounces off of buildings and mountains and hills and trees. Also, when the signal has to penetrate through walls or past trees, that's also going to degrade the quality of your signal, and it's going to make it harder for you to get a signal. Luckily, here in the valley, most of the time we can get a strong signal just about wherever you put it, but it is something to keep in mind. UHF can get very you can have a problem when it comes to interference with that. So, moving on from UHF and VHF, we have location of your antenna and location of where you live, basically. We like to use a great tool here at TV Specialist called TV Fool. TV Fool? TVFool.com. On tvfool.com, you can actually go in, you can enter in your address, and you can pull up a completely free, they don't even ask for a credit card or a free trial or recurring payments, anything like that. You can get this nice signal analysis report that we have behind us. I've been pointing at the laptop where the presentation is, so I apologize. But this thing, in here, it has a nice little compass with true north, and you can see that most of the channels are almost directly west. Never eat soggy waffles, right? Northeast, southwest. And also right here, we have all of the channels that you can expect to receive when you get your antenna. Whenever we do an antenna install, we make it a practice to check the address first so that we know whether we can actually promise any channels to this customer. Now, it's also color-coded, which is good to see. Green means that you have plenty of signal, which is outlined here in this dB. And with that, it's good because you can distribute that signal to multiple televisions, and you shouldn't have much of a problem splitting it. Splitting does create loss, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. But overall, any of these channels in the green should be fine for a home distribution system. And if you just wanted to get a small table set antenna, which is coming up soon, that would be sufficient to get quality to power your TV. When you get to the yellow, they recommend at least putting an antenna in the attic because you need to be up a little higher. You need to be almost more direct line of sight. It's going to be a little bit more challenging to pick up reception, clear reception on those channels. When you get to the red, it's highly recommended to only use a roof mount antenna. You need to be up high. You need to have as direct of a path as you can to the transmitters out at Farnsworth Peak. And then when you get to the gray, good luck. If we pull up your address and all it is gray, we will not guarantee that we'll get any channels. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but you will need to take extreme measures to get anything if possible. And you're gonna need a lot of luck, mostly. We did an antenna install at a cabin out past Camas, and we were supposed to point it, it was a few years ago, I can't remember exactly. We'll say we had to point it straight west. We ended up pointing it north with a very high gain antenna, and we had enough to power one TV. And it took us 2 days. Generally, we can do a full antenna install in about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on the amount of TVs. So that was a big deal. One more thing to keep in mind is the NMDB on there. Generally, we want to keep that up above 0 when you're doing all of your splits and your losses. On here, it is an approximation. That is not an actual reading. They do not have little signal strength meters at every location constantly updating this table with information. But it is good to remember when we talk about splitting and loss that can be created when you wire your house. Antenna types. When it comes to antenna, you need to decide what kind of throw you need, what kind of reception you're going to get. Are you going to be pointing straight at an antenna, or do you have a few different points, or a transmitter? Or do you have a couple different points that you need more of a wide spread? Or are your transmitters in opposite directions? So you have omnidirectional, which will do a full wraparound. You have unidirectional, which generally provide more gain, but you do need to be aimed more specifically at your point, or you will not get reception. So if your mount ends up, over time, shifting a little bit, your TV channels may stop working one morning. And it could be as easy as just readjusting that, but something to be aware of. Now this right here is the antenna we mostly use when we do installs here in the Valley. It provides about a 10 dB gain, and it points this way, not this way. We call it the barbecue grill because it kind of looks like you could cook some steaks on here. It's nice and light, it's not too large, and it's a pretty easy one to do. This can power, here in the Valley, can provide enough signal for an entire 8 TVs, generally speaking, as long as the wiring is good. And it's just our go-to. I'm not sure what else to say about that. This indoor antenna, this is an example of a directional antenna. And the picture isn't super great on there, but it's oriented more in a V, and it's going to point towards the transmitters, and that helps provide it with more gain, and it is a lot smaller. So one thing to keep in mind with the indoor antennas is occasionally they'll come with little amplifiers that you can plug into the wall, and it provides with just a little bit more power. Those work best when you point them out of a window. Walls are really, really tough to work with when you're dealing with indoor antennas. However, here in the Valley, I've seen that work to provide signal for one TV. I've actually gotten it off of a coax before. See, the customer could not understand why a lot of their channels weren't working. Everything seemed good. The antenna was aimed up well. All the cabling leading down was solid and sound. They had 2 coax cables down behind their TV, one from the antenna and one that was just kind of nestled in the back. And somehow they got about 14 channels of just a piece of coax. So that is really good when we live so close to a transmitter. Keep that in mind. Moving on to home wiring. Aiming the antenna, especially if you're putting it on the roof, is pretty easy, generally speaking. You need a coax cable into your television, and that's going to provide your signal and your channels. But if you're having problems in pixelation and the picture falls in and out, then you probably have a cabling issue. When it comes to cabling, two things to keep in mind. Our older homes were wired with RG59, which if you look at the diagram, it's the one on the left, and it's probably a little tough to tell on there, but the center conductor is a smaller gauge than the RG6 on the right. That's, I'm gonna say, the biggest difference and the most noticeable. However, RG6 also does tend to have better shielding, which is going to prevent interference when it comes to running across electrical wires and generally just any electrical noise that is going on outside and interfering with these waves and your cable runs. The RG6 is going to do a much better job at blocking those out. And I do have a couple examples. If the camera can zoom in on this, this is an example of an RG59 cable. That gauge is super tiny. I'm trying not to move so we can zoom in on it. Got the thumbs up. And I have some RG6.
Actually, grab both of them and come up to Buddy's great chairs for a second.
Okay.
Stand right in front of the great chairs.
Okay. Let's see if we can see the difference. One thing to notice on my RG6 is it is terminated poorly. So also keep in mind, you can see that the white material, the dielectric, is not pushed all the way up to the sleeve. That is another thing to look for if you are inspecting cables or experiencing any sort of issue with your picture going, is it could be the integrity of your cables. It may mean you have to remove a few wall plates. A lot of times the coax will be screwed into the back of the wall plate. Take that out, inspect it. You should be able to give it a tug and not have it fall off. And if you can see that there's a gap between your dielectric and the sleeve, then we would recommend retipping it. And for you guys, I'm gonna retip a cable. You just cut that off, throw it away. You don't need it anymore. I got this tool from Home Depot. It's 14 bucks. If you're gonna do a lot of them, saves you a lot of time. You can also use some wire cutters or a razor blade. The nice thing about this is you just insert the wire, spin it around a few times, and our cameraman Jake should be able to see that, but it strips out a piece of bare wire and a little bit with the shielding and the dielectric in the middle, which is what you'll need for the sleeve. This is a quad shielded RG6, so this is going to cut out a lot of interference. It can be tricky to terminate. Depending on the F connectors that you have, this is an F connector. I like to use the Klein compression ones because they slide right over the quad shield. If you go with other ones, they are not necessarily better or worse, but I have noticed with some of the other brands, I'll have to get my razor blade out and actually shave away one of the shields. So I take it from a quad shield to a triple shield. When you have to do 20 of these in a home, that time adds up. So you just do that, slide it on. You'll have to get strong fingers, but from our gentleman here in the front, you'll be able to see that the dielectric is pushed all the way up to the sleeve. So that will be a very well terminated cable. The next thing you do, because this is not the end, take a compression tool. Again, Home Depot, like $14, real easy. Insert that in and compress it all the way down till it clicks. Now we've terminated an RG6. That is not going anywhere. You can't pull that off. It's nice and sturdy. That's going to create a good flowing conductor. If you're putting this outside, connecting it at the antenna, we do recommend putting either a little rubber boot over it or using electrical tape to help keep the metal protected from the elements. It'll just help longevity. We had a customer one time that their channels just over time started fading. We went up to the antenna, looked fine, but upon touching the cable, it fell right out of the F connector. So, and it's just because it was not protected from the elements. I mean, it was up there for like 20 years, took quite a while. But unless you want to get on your roof and find that out, just do it right the first time, you're set. The next thing to know with cabling is splitters. Every time that you split your signal, you lose about 3.5 decibels. On top of that, every time you have a connection from your F connector to a splitter or F connector to a plate and another cable, and if you were to daisy chain cables to add length, you're losing about 0.5 decibel per connection point, and you lose, I believe it is, I have this part written down, you lose about 5.6 decibels per 100 feet. So if you remember from the previous slide, how most of the channels here in the valley started at about 50 dB in here. Every time you split, that's going down 3, half, 6, depending on the length of your cable runs and the splits. Then, and you'll see from the picture, if you were to put in an 8-way splitter, that means you lose, which is a little bit higher res, you lose 11 decibels per connection terminal on there. So if you were to only have 2 8-way splitters and you needed to do a little bit of a weird run, I don't know, you're jerry-rigging it a little bit, and you split it with an 8-way and then run it into another 8-way and split it, your signal is starting to go down quite a bit very quickly. Every time the signal goes down 3 dB, it actually halvens the signal strength. It's on a logarithmic scale, so it is a little, when you were in algebra in high school, you said, when am I ever going to have to use this? It's with antennas. You don't have to understand all of it. Again, as long as you're not doing anything too crazy and your channels are in the green, you're probably going to be okay. But they are things to keep in mind, because if you're starting off in a yellow, or you know, if you're in the middle of the city and you have a big building next to you and you're happy to just get that signal to begin with, you might want to opt for a smaller splitter, and that could make a big difference. One other thing, when it comes to over-the-air high definition, you're going to make sure that your splitters are rated for at least 1 gigahertz frequency. That's 100 or 1,000 megahertz. And that will make sure that it can pass the amount of information as quickly as it needs to. Satellite and cable TVs oftentimes require a higher frequency pass, but for your over-the-air channels, 1 gig should do just fine. Next, you've got your antenna up, you've got it in a good location, it's pointing west at Farnsworth Peak. You only have it, we'll say, split twice. All of your cables are nice and sound and hold integrity. You have to make sure you can tune it in. And about tuning, you have analog channels, digital channels. The NTSC, that was the tuner used to tune for the analog channels back in the day. I don't know, like 6, 7 years ago, 10 years ago. It was something like that. It was a while back when they got rid of the analog TV. Nothing's really analog anymore. But if you have an old tube TV that you just can't get rid of, and you don't have any dots on your remote, dots or dashes, then you probably have an NTSC tuner, and you probably cannot pick up digital channels. When you move to an ATSC tuner, which is going to be put in the majority of TVs built and manufactured in 2007 and later, majority of flat screens, if you buy your TV within the last few years, you're good to go. It's going to have an ATSC tuner in it, and it's going to pick up those HD TV channels, all the digital channels. If you are stuck with your old one and you don't want to get rid of it for whatever reason, you don't like seeing faces, you can pick up a digital tuner box. This is the one we carry here in the shop. Not saying it's the best, not saying it's the worst, but it does the trick. And you, instead of running your coax into the back of your TV, you'd run it into this box. And then with an HDMI cable or a composite video cable, you would then transfer the information from this box to your TV. Just like hooking up a VCR or a Blu-ray player, DVD player. Makes it nice and easy. It comes with its own remote. And that is how you would retrofit an older TV to pick up newer HD TV channels. If you're only using composite video cables, though, to go from this to your TV, your broadcast will not be in 1080. Keep that in mind. If you are looking to upgrade cheaply, we do also offer refurbished flat screen TVs. I think all of them have digital tuners. I don't think we repair any that don't have a digital tuner for sale. So that's also another thing to keep in mind. Scanning for the channels. You've verified you have the right tuner in your TV and you're confident you can pick up channels. Each television manufacturer decides to word this differently in the menus, so I wish there was a cookie cutter way to do it. Generally speaking, you'll go to settings, and I think the camera can see this TV right here. It is a Sony XBR series. It's going to be the first one on the left, Jake. But if I enter the home key and go down to settings, there is a channels submenu. And depending on your TV manufacturer, it may be channels, it may be broadcast, it may just be under antenna. They like to really keep us on our toes on that. Oops, I'm sorry. Maybe I was wrong on that. Yeah, but it's not there. Oh, channel setup. Sorry, I was looking for a scan for channels already. You can choose your type. Keep in mind, if you are installing an antenna, you do not want to scan for cable channels. You'll scan for antenna. And you can just do auto program, and that will start the process and find all of your channels. Occasionally you'll find a few analog channels here and there, but really the digital ones are where you want to be. This isn't hooked up to an antenna.
It is.
Is it hooked up?
Yes.
Are we gonna find any channels?
You're going to find 74 channels.
The going is 74 channels today on Price is Right. Usually when we do antenna installs in the valley, we'll pick up, depending on antenna location, high 40s to low 70s when it comes to channels. And it all just kind of depends on whether we put the antenna upstairs or if it's in an attic somewhere. That it's crazy, but that can be the difference of about 6 channels. A lot of those channels, majority of our customers don't watch. Even in the attic, you'll get your major, like KSL, KJazz, Fox, CBS, and ABC. But some of those shopping channels, if you can't live without them, you're going to have to put it on the roof. That's just how it is. I'm not going to make us sit through this channel scan, but you can see already we've got 43. As the camera pans, we're all on the edge of our seat over here, in case you can't feel the tension through the virtual YouTube channel. I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. Back to how we were. Great. Next thing, scan channels. Occasionally the frequencies change. The FCC has decided to sell a few of the frequencies for other purposes. I hope they made good money on it. We don't know, they don't give us those details. But coming up, it was supposed to be in July. It's been moved to September, so these dates could change depending on when you watch this video. But as of right now, as of right now, in September, a few of the channel frequencies will be changing. All that really means is you may go to watch TV, your channel won't dial in properly, so you'll just need to do a channel scan. Your TV will sort it all out. That's really about it. It won't be life-threatening. Doesn't mean your TV's broken or your antenna is no good anymore. You don't need to purchase anything. Just redo a channel scan and you're good. That's phase 1. Phase 2, as of right now, could change again, is scheduled to change November 30th. I've listed a few of the main channels that we understand that are going to be changing as of right now. And so you have like KBYU, I think that's channel 11, KUED is 7, KSL is 5, KGJT is Telemundo, I believe channel 50, KJazz channel 14, and then on November 30th, KTVX channel 4, and KUCW channel 30. So not a ton of changes, but again, if you do the channel scan, you'll be in good shape. So just to recap, before you start your do-it-yourself antenna install, make sure to do a site survey so that you can get your reality straight, your dreams straight with your reality. Make sure you can get the channels and see if it's even worth it doing the installation or where you'll have to place it. Make sure to point your antenna towards the transmitters. They can work if you point them away, but they work best pointing at the transmitters. Make sure your distribution cabling, splitters, all of those are sound and that you're not splitting it too often or too much. Do your longer runs first and then split versus splitting at closer to the antenna and then doing longer runs down each lane. And then scanning for channels. Do we have any questions? Okay, so Dave here in the showroom is asking if when terminating an RG6, whether you need to use the compression tool or if you could potentially use some vice grips. Honestly, I've never tried it with vice grips. You probably could, however, you would want to keep constant pressure around the ring and on the back. So if you're good at that, go for it. You can buy, I mean, a tub of 50 of these, I think, is about, depending on the brand, between $14 to $35. And so if you break one, it isn't going to be the end of the world. But I would say that if you know you're going to be doing a few, this is well worth it. If you get it from Home Depot and you keep the packaging good, you could probably just take it back in an hour. We have no affiliation with Home Depot. Again, and we have one more question. Hold on, just in case we are getting close to wrapping up. If you have not entered for our antenna giveaway, make sure to follow the link in the YouTube channel description and enter to win. It will be one of these, and you can have your very own free broadcasting TV at home. But okay, we have another question. Yes. So he asked if we used an 8-way splitter, and if you remember in the slide, that meant that each point is going to lose 11 dBs of signal quality versus a 2-way splitter, which would lose 3.5. If we only hooked up 2, would it only lose 3.5? Or would it lose the 11? And the answer is it would still lose the 11, whether those are connected to anything or not. And it's basically just, I mean, it's the 3.5, and you draw a little tree, and then off of there, 3.5, and you have to sum them. And then you do one more. And if I was hoping to have a whiteboard, I was going to draw that out, but I can, yeah. So he was asking if, say we took a 2-way splitter, you had your run to the splitter, and then off of each tree, off of each branch, if you ran one, let's say another 200 feet and one 3 feet, would you experience the same signal loss on the 200 feet? Would that kind of backtrack and level out the loss field, if you will? And the answer is no. So that's, you'll have a little bit of loss on your 3-foot jump, and on your 200-foot jumper, you would have a lot less loss. So on that line, if you were running into problems, maybe even using a line level amplifier could help with that, or having a more sensitive tuner, one of those could help if you were experiencing problems. And one other thing too, when it comes to running cables, if you can keep your RG6 away from electrical lines or perpendicular to electrical lines, that will also help alleviate loss in your cable runs. I think we had one other question in the back.
If I don't want to do this myself, do you guys offer install?
So this customer is really lazy. It's my manager. He just wants to let me know, or let everybody know, we do antenna installations here. You can call into the shop and speak with either me or Jeff. And then more than likely, I'll be the one going to your house to check to make sure that we could install the antenna where you want it, run your cables, and then we'd send installers out there to finish the project. And all of our labor, if you did hire us, is good for 90 days. So we can get it in there. You can make sure to watch your channels and make sure that it is going to work. And if it doesn't, you can call us back up, we'll fix it. Occasionally, there'll be like one channel or something that acts up around 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, and so we love to go out and fix those ones. But any other questions? Okay, thank you for.
Online one.
Oh, we have an online question.
Yeah. Who came up with material for Willie Nelson and Snoop Dogg? UHF versus VHF. That material is great.
I wish I could take credit for it. Unfortunately,
Good question, 'cause they can't hear you.
oh yeah. So the question was, who came up with the joke for Willie Nelson, the very high frequently, and Snoop Dogg, the ultra high frequently? I would love to take all of the credit. I came up with that wording, but the first mention of the Willie Nelson and the Snoop Dogg was our programmer, actually. I was putting together some presentation, and he said, oh, Willie Nelson is very high, and Snoop Dogg is more high. And so we kind of ran with it. And we didn't think it would make it to the final draft of the presentation, but I'm glad it did. So I believe we're going to do the drawing now.
We've got
And-
one more entry.
One more entry is getting in, probably an online submission. Do keep in mind, we'll be back here live streaming at 3:30 up in our theater showroom. So you'll be able to see a little bit of that with voice controls and home automation on a budget, I believe is the official title, with our presenter, Dan Austin. So again, I'm Lonnie Martinez. I'm a design coordinator here.